So our first featured speaker is going to be Chaz Billington. He is our third graduate today from the University of Akron School of Law. Chaz is an HR attorney and a partner at Voorhees, Sater, Seymour, and Peace in its Cleveland office. He is a member of the Labor and Employment Group. Chaz is an Akron native, former VP of HR, in addition to being an alumni of the University of Akron. He has significant experience advising in-house legal counsel and HR leaders on a wide range of labor and employment matters, which means that he has some of the best stories. I know that you're really going to enjoy his very dynamic presentation. Please give a warm welcome to Chaz. So I have to have a little bit of fun with you. So my 10-year-old is really into dad jokes. Okay, so I have a dad joke for you. Okay. From one lawyer to another, why did the lawyer go to court wearing a shirt with no sleeves?
You got me.
Yeah, they're right, the bare arms.
Oh. If you get one takeaway from today, it's that lawyers are not boring. So I'll talk to you a little bit about AI in the workplace today. As you can see, try to keep it fun, upbeat. My slides will be ridiculous. I will have funny stories, hopefully funny. Throughout the presentation, though, you should feel free, ask questions. Whether you want to call them out or you want to use the Slido, happy to talk to you about it. As Amanda would know, I have to give the proviso that I can't give you legal advice, though. Don't you love when lawyers do that? Hey, I'm going to talk to you about the law for an hour and a half. This is not legal advice. And the reason being is I don't know the particular facts of a particular situation, but I will give you some guardrails, right? One of the more interesting things about the topic I'm going to talk about today is typically, when I'm speaking, it's this is what the law says. The law requires you to do this or that. The great thing about AI, particularly in the employment space, is it's basically Thunderdome at this point. There really aren't any laws. There are a lot of guardrails and guideposts, and I'll walk you through that. But I'm going to be candid with you. A lot of this is just my best guess. I've also had about, 6 cups of coffee, so buckle up. I want to correct the record briefly as well. I got waitlisted at the University of Akron School of Law. I'm not bitter. Still became a lawyer. So there. But I have been working for about 15 years practicing law, particularly and specifically in the HR space. I do have some really funny stories. HR lawyers have the best stories. A lot of what you see, I see. Why? Because you call me, and usually it's really curated and crystallized by the time you call me. It's not like, hey, this person asked for time off. Should we give it to them? No, it's something unbelievable. A couple of years ago, several years ago, don't let my boyish looks fool you, I've been doing this for a while, I actually started practicing HR. I jumped out because I'd been practicing law in my ivory tower, dispensing HR advice, but I'd never actually practiced HR. And so for a period of about 4 years, I was a VP of HR, and it was a, thoroughly enlightening experience. And about maybe the first week, I'm actually doing HR. I think, I'm a lawyer, I'm possessed of a tremendous amount of unearned confidence, right, as all lawyers are. And I thought, I can do this is not a problem. And one of the first calls I got was, hey, we have this interviewee. Okay, yeah, how's it going good? Yeah, it's going really good. They're out in the, they did the interview, but they're waiting for the next interview. And then they left, they ran outside. I'm like, well, they ran outside, what are you talking about? And they're like, and then we see the cameras, and they ran out in the front, and they pooped in the bushes. And then they came back in. What do you think? About what? What advice would you like me to give you here? Well, do you think they need an accommodation? I'm like, for pooping in the bushes? What are we talking about? So I gained a tremendous amount of respect in that moment, and then in the following years for what HR actually does. I realized I was talking about HR. I wasn't practicing HR. I wasn't seeing the practical impact of my advice in the workplace. I was telling people to have these terrible conversations, but I wasn't the one having them. And I think having practice, it gave me a tremendous amount of insight. It also allowed me to see behind the curtain into the systems, right? HRIS, benefits, the way these things hook into the greater HR scheme. And so I think I have a little bit of a unique perspective as a lawyer, having been in-house, having done that, and I'll bring some of that with you today. I also want to tell you another quick story. I left this morning. I have a 13-year-old daughter, so you can imagine what that's like. And I threw the suit on, but I threw some sneakers on, and I was like, it's going to be kind of cool, kind of fun, approachable. You get it. Yeah, you're nodding. Right, yeah. And my daughter's up, and I said, hey, she said, where are you going? I'm like, I'm going to go give a presentation. I said, well, how do I look? She said, you look like a congressman who's going to go talk to some kids at a high school. And it was deeply hurtful. So here I am. Let's talk a little bit about me. Uh-oh. Do it. There we go. This is my headshot. And since it's on brand, I will tell you, this is an AI-generated headshot. It was just a regular horse to start. So I put the horn on with AI, obviously. So I have a really good headshot person if you would like to chat with them. So we're going to talk a lot about AI in the modern workplace. Why? Title of my slide tells you everything you need to know. It's already there. I think some of the hands went up earlier when you said, who's using AI in the workplace? This guy's on his phone right now. He's absolutely on ChatGPT. He's like, give me some really terrible question to ask this lawyer to call him out in front of everybody. But yeah, everybody's using it, and why it's proliferated because of just ease of access. It used to be this amalgamous thing, right? This nebulous concept. What is AI? We didn't know what it was. But then we'll talk about the advent of it. ChatGPT came around, right? And now it's readily accessible. You've got Meta, you've got Copilot, you've got Gemini, you've got all these different access points. And it's going to be built into your phone soon, right? It's going to come with Apple Intelligence. And so increasingly over the last few years, we started getting these questions, and really at a fever pitch in this last year about what are we going to do here? How are we going to govern this? And I'll talk at the end of this presentation about how you get prepared for this in your workplace. What do you need to do to really stay apprised of the enterprise level risks that AI poses for your organization? So it's not a fad. It's not going anywhere. Remember when people probably were like, oh, email, that's never going to last, right? The internet, who's going to use that? I think AI is transformative. I think much like the cotton gin and the movable typeface, I think it is going to revolutionize the way that we do work, and it's critical to stay apprised of that because I think the doctor's presentation was particularly salient in the sense that this expertise paradox is real. We see it in our own work, right? We have young associates at the firm who pump out work product, and it's like, this looks pretty good. Tell me about this. And they're like, I know nothing about this. It's like anything, right? If you want to build yourself up, you got to work out. You got to put the reps in. And I think that is, for me, the number one risk with AI is that you can short circuit your way to a level of perceived expertise when you don't understand the subject matter. And likewise, it represents a tremendous amount of risk from an enterprise perspective with respect to confidentiality and privacy, and believe it or not, discrimination and harassment. All of these things we are seeing start to percolate, and the law, you may realize, is usually lagging pretty significantly. Should you hold your breath here and now for Congress to pass laws about AI? No? Anybody has a hard yes on that? They're a well-oiled machine. They get stuff done. Don't hold your breath. It's probably not happening. So who's going to regulate it? Who's going to pass these laws? Just so many murmurs. I mean, it is 8:30, I get it. The states are going to pass those laws. That's where we're seeing the advent of this, and particularly in other countries. Canada's ahead of us. The European Union's way ahead of us, way ahead of us. And we'll talk a little bit about how those might affect you. So, let's talk about modern AI, what it's not. Who's this guy? It's on there. It literally says, HAL, yeah. Space Odyssey, right? Killer computer. I love hearing people talk about hallucination. Why not make super smart killer robots that, oh, by the way, also hallucinate? Who's this guy? You probably have to be a certain age demographic to know who this. Yeah, it's the Terminator, right? Like, I threw this slide together one time, and I was at an event, and it was just a demographic of less vintage, and people are just like, robot. No, dude, that's the Terminator. Come on, like, this is what we thought about AI, right? It's going to kill us all. It's going to become self-aware. Hasn't happened yet. How about these guys, little robot butlers? Yeah, R2 and C3PO. These are versions of AI, right? Protocol droids, right? Astromechs, things that can think like us, things that can do things that we do, can converse with you. So what is actually AI? Well, your speakers will tell you more about this today, but you've been using AI for a long, long time. It's in a lot of different things. I will say, there's a lot of hucksters out there. Everyone's like, this has AI in it. I think one of the biggest issues I see is people don't understand what AI is. Like, I don't want to buy an AI toaster. I don't understand what that would give me, right? And a lot of companies are advertising, we got AI in it, it's got AI in it. And you ask them, well, what kind of AI is in it? And they say, it's AI, the good kind. So I think there's a misconception as to what this is. There's algorithms, there's large language models, then there's generative AI, right? Then there's agentic AI. There's all these different kinds. I'm not gonna bore you with those details. I think Amy will later. She's also much smarter than I am in this area, so she will talk to you probably a little bit more about that. You should definitely ask her really specific questions about all the kinds of AI, exactly how they work, how much they cost, et cetera. But I want to talk about what we see AI in today. It is actually a term that was coined quite a while ago. Believe it or not, in 1956, AI short for artificial intelligence, if you have not picked that up yet. And it is basically the human science of making machines think like humans. That's what it is, right? Making a machine. What could possibly go wrong in 2024 with teaching machines to think like humans? But that's really what it is, to substitute us, to augment what we do based on a computer system or a program. And it's processing a staggering amount of data. I mean, we're talking billions and billions and billions of inputs simultaneously, things that we would never be able to do as humans. These things can do. And the goal really is to have it recognize patterns, make judgment decisions, be able to understand the way we think and give us exactly what we need. Has anybody used like the modern interpretation of AI? Does it work just like you? Ready to rock, just plug it into ChatGPT and you're good to go? No? You're saying no? No. It's got some work to do, right? We're seeing at least some gaps in the ability to recreate exactly what we do. ChatGPT started the craze a few years ago. Remember COVID? No? Yeah, you remember COVID. Remember when ChatGPT like blew up and people were writing like weird scripts and rap songs and stuff? That's when we saw it really hit in the modern place, right? We saw it start to blow up in the workplace a little bit, but when that went live, we started to see more of it. And then about 2022, 2023, we started to see generative AI, which was a radical leap forward. It wasn't just writing, Simpsons scripts and stuff for you or, your holiday cards. It was actually doing a lot more, and it was a lot more robust, particularly as we saw ChatGPT 4 get released, and then we saw a lot of these large language models get a lot more sophisticated. It really, really blew up. As far as you know, this whole presentation was written by AI. I have done nothing here. So, no presentation by lawyer or otherwise would be complete without statistics. And here are some statistics for you. Feel free to take pictures of this. 50% of workers currently report using AI in the workplace. I mean, that's a pretty staggering amount if you think about the modern job market. That's a lot of people. And I highlight this to say that to the extent you think your organization isn't using it, you might not be from an enterprise level, right? You might have a good handle on, well, we're not using AI, we don't use that. But I can guarantee you that your rank and file folks are, probably on a daily basis. They're using it to do a lot of different things. They may be just writing emails with it. They may be writing speeches with it. They may be crunching numbers, writing code with it, a variety of different things. And we'll talk a little bit later about really getting a handle on what they're doing and really how to necessarily curb that and protect your organization. Because to me, the critical issue right now with AI, discrimination and harassment, they're coming up the pipeline. It's data privacy, it's confidentiality, and it's protection of your intellectual property. We've seen myriad examples of people loading confidential information into an AI system. Who reads the terms of service? I can tell you what, I don't. I do this for a living. I don't read the terms of service. If you load confidential or proprietary information into a large language model, into ChatGPT. Who do you think owns it? Ma'am? Me? They do? Yes, they do. They do, absolutely. Once it is out, it is tough to unring that bell. So 63% of workers report that it's had a positive impact on productivity. But I think there's another side, there's a flip side of that. You know, the dock workers strike right now is a great example, right? What is one of the main things that the dock workers are primarily concerned with? Automation, right? They don't want their jobs automated. And I'm not gonna go into philosophy, morals, ethics, or whatever of the strike. But I do think that it is a salient concern for a large amount of the population. They don't want to be replaced by what? The robots, right? Notwithstanding, I do think it has a tremendous impact to augment what we do. It's not necessarily that it's going to replace what you do, but I do think it will have the ability to augment, make you better. Who does not want to be able to do more in less time? Who wants to be busier? Great. 8% of folks are writing content with it, brainstorming, and 50% are just doing research with it, right? Background research. It's incredibly helpful to do background research. Lawyers, I don't know if you do, I have plugged it in and said, hey, I don't know anything about this. Can you tell me? Get me started. So it's definitely being used. But only 26% of companies actually have AI policies. I will tell you at the end of this the best practices for policies. But I think at a very high level, if you are not at least thinking of an AI governance model of some kind, you are behind. You are very much behind. You need to understand what it is doing, how you're using it, and when you start using it, what are all the potential impacts, right? There are myriads of laws that potentially go into this. There's bias testing. There's all these different things you should be doing, and that AI governance model is your starting point. There are great resources online that can help you get started there, but definitely you should be thinking about this because, again, it's not going away. But let's talk about some of the ways you're currently using AI, probably today. I used this morning. Who's this guy? This person, sorry. This person, yeah, Siri. Who's using Siri? Yeah? I've always wanted to try this at a presentation. Hey Siri, remind me in 2 weeks to send Chaz a bunch of legal work. Nailed it. We'll talk soon. They're pervasive, right? They're always listening. Who hasn't had the thing where it's like, hey, you talked about some particular thing and now I have 75 ads for that thing because I casually mentioned it. Yeah, these things are all over. What's this? I used AI this morning because AI drove me here. I drove here in my Tesla. So you're seeing it particularly in this space. Google Gemini, free, online, plug it into your web browser, and you have an AI model built by who? Who built Gemini? Google. This is a pretty big tech company. Yeah? Think you probably trust Gemini? Yeah, it probably works pretty well. No, you are hard pass on that. You don't trust Google. You're an Alta Vista gal. I like it. Meta. Facebook's great, right? They should definitely have all your data. What could go wrong with Tesla building or Facebook building a super smart robot? What if it learns off of Facebook? Would that be good? What if it was singularly being trained off of Facebook? I think that would be fine. Copilot. Copilot is now being increasingly built directly into the Microsoft Office 365 framework, right? So you will see it. Hopefully it's like, this is probably the new paperclip, or how everyone hated the paperclip. Copilot's gonna be like, hey, what's up? It's AI guy. What can I do for you? So this stuff's being built in. So, I put this stuff in here just to highlight, look, you may not be going out and using a vendor and buying an AI system, but notwithstanding, it is already pervading. It is inside your workplace. You folks, does anybody have a BYOD policy, bring your own device? Very different from a BYOB policy, which I would not recommend that you have. BYOD, does anybody have those? Bring your own device? Yeah. So one of the things we'll talk about later when we talk about your policies, practices, and procedures as it pertains to AI is linking them into the existing policies, particularly a BYOD, right? We want to know how you're using this stuff if you're accessing our architecture, if you're accessing our framework, if you're putting our information into that system. So it's not that smart or scary yet, but it is pretty smart, and it's a little bit scary. It's definitely in your workplace. Again, it's going to augment. It's probably not going to kill us all yet. The jury's out. But I think really today we're going to focus the latter half of this presentation on where AI has gone wrong, where we have seen some whoopsie daisies. We're going to talk about where the law is, and it is on the periphery here. The law is rarely, save for a couple of instances in the United States, directly interfacing with AI, saying this is what you should or shouldn't do with AI from an employment law perspective. We caveat that aggressively. There are some AI laws. So it's handy. Anybody used AI for any of this stuff in HR? Yeah, several of you. It's really handy. It can do a lot of different things. Recruitment and hiring is where I see it primarily. It can flip through 1 million resumes really quickly and pull out people for you that are tailor-made for a job. I've seen staffing companies that I think are just robots. I don't even know if they're actual staffing companies. I think they're literally just an algorithm. Some companies are priding themselves we literally have no humans. This is a robot that will pick candidates for you. Again, what could possibly go wrong? Onboarding, seen that as well. Chatbots are pervasive in this area. We'll talk a little bit about how chatbots can go wrong, but you've seen chatbots, right? Who's been fooled by a chatbot? They used to be so bad that you would just type human 100 times until it would give you an actual human, but I would say that they're much better nowadays. We're seeing these be integrated increasingly into shared services. HR organizations, hey, I need to reset my password. Okay, cool. Yeah, the AI can't handle that, right? I need to have this information about the 401k or benefits plan. Chatbot can really easily handle that as well. We're seeing it in performance management, believe it or not. These algorithms can look through, particular skill sets. It can look through output. It can look through metrics and things like that and talk about where people might be ready for promotion or where they are lagging in their job duties. Analytics, you guys, I know HR people just love analytics, right? Do you deeply love analytics? Yeah, I'm sure you do. Yo, this lady's, wait, do you have an analytics tattoo? Does that I see? Is that what you're holding up? HR analytics for life. Yeah, the big one, like spider web, and then it says HR analytics. Yeah, analytics, these things, again, able to crunch numbers at an absolutely staggering rate, right? They can pattern recognize in a way that we may not be able to. Employee assistance and support and compliance and risk management, all places we see it. But I'll tell you why I know that it is really handy. It's because it wrote that slide. That entire slide was not me, that was just ChatGPT. I said, hey, tell me how you can use AI in the HR space. It's also why this slide was like super boring compared to the other slides, like there's no CAD pictures or anything. But yeah, if I can do that in seconds, your people absolutely can too. Let's do some examples. So, this is my law firm. This is not our actual logo. But I had Copilot generate for me. So from the marketing space, I had Copilot. I said, hey, look, give me a logo for a law firm called Voorhees. Practices law. I want this color scheme. And this is what it pumped out in a matter of seconds. Looks pretty good, right? I mean, you would pay for this, maybe, I don't know. I mean, the spelling is bizarre. The mustache I don't hate. Not sure how it came up with that. I think it may have the camera on. But you could see your folks' inclination to want to use this, right? This is a real time saver. Being able to knock this out in seconds versus paying a vendor to do it, really enticing. So this is the way we're seeing it used. Human resources. I see this a lot. This is actually one of the number one ways I interface with HR for my clients. Let's see if this will work. This is a video. Let's see if I hit the button if it'll play. Nope. Imagine this was a video. Is it going? So this is ChatGPT drafting an entire employee handbook in about 2 minutes. Soup to nuts. This is an entire employee handbook. I had to draft at-will employment policies. I had to draft a variety of different things. I mean, look how fast that went. It was incredibly fast. And I got to tell you, at first blush, you didn't know if you weren't, a professional lawyer. You would say, yeah, that's great. And I've had clients use this. I've had clients send it to me and say, here's our handbook. Do you think that it's compliant, legally speaking? No? Anybody doesn't care? It's absolutely not legally compliant. Why? Because you will never stop paying lawyers. No, it's not legally, yeah, right? It's not legally compliant for a number of reasons. One, there are these idiosyncrasies amongst the states. And so this handbook looked great. North Carolina's got a law that says you have to have your at-will disclaimer in bold, underlined font. Not in here, right? So would your at-will disclaimer work in North Carolina? It would not. Montana is not an at-will state. Who knew that? You? All right. No? Yeah. 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 So you can put in the states. I've done that. It still doesn't catch it, right? There are so many laws, particularly like in my space. You know, after COVID, we saw a lot of remote work, right? And we're seeing folks working across multiple states. And one of the big war drums I beat all the time is that even if you're an Ohio employer, you are subject to multiple states' laws. Why? Where are you posting? You're posting on LinkedIn and Indeed. And where are those postings going? Everywhere. Some states have things called pay transparency laws. Colorado's a great example, right? If you don't put the pay range in the listing, and that listing goes up in Colorado, you have violated the law. Same thing is true with Washington. We've seen a couple of class action lawsuits already out of Colorado and Washington because folks were posting, and their postings went up in those states, and they weren't compliant with the state's laws. And they caught a class action. Why? Because they had 1,000 postings go up in those states. Did they hire anyone? Maybe not. Does it matter? No. It matters whether somebody actually applied for the job and you got yourself a class action lawsuit. And who wins in class action lawsuits? The lawyers. They generate a tremendous amount of fees. You ever get, then the class action ends and what do you get? Here's your check for $4 because you bought a Palm Pilot 25 years ago. So, you know, you can see if you're using this stuff why it's particularly dangerous in our space from a compliance perspective because of these pervasive state laws. This patchwork, this federalist system we have that works so well and we all love so much is really subjecting you to liability across 50 states, possibly Puerto Rico, right? So when you see the handbook drafted here, it looks great at first blush. You know, I would typically mark these up pretty aggressively because I have to, you know, I get paid by the hour. But, you know, we would mark them up for compliance-related reasons because they do not comply with multiple states' laws. This was a great example. I had to draft a few other things, and it's, you know, it's good. It gets you, I would say, 75% of the way there. But we see these not only being generated, but we see them being used, and that is a huge issue. And so when you talk about the way that your organization interfaces with AI in the workplace, like this is the kinds of things we see that generate a potentially tremendous amount of liability. And copyright infringement's another one, and we'll talk about that momentarily, but this is one where I have these policies sent to me all the time. Here's our policy on sexual harassment. The robot wrote it. What do you think? I think it's bad. And why? What is it using? So ChatGPT 3 has a cutoff date. Did you know that these large language models, that these AI systems have a cutoff date, a date range? Anybody know what ChatGPT 3's date range is? You probably know. No? 2021. Did you know? So I only award you 5 points. You were close. You are in the lead, though. 2021, ChatGPT 4, I believe 2023. So if it happened yesterday, it's not going to pick it up. And the law changes, particularly when you talk about multi-state compliance. Every single day, there's some kind of new law. Paid sick and safe leaves are passing by the day. And so it's not going to pick this stuff up because it doesn't know that it exists. In its universe, these laws do not exist. And so that is absolutely a place where you need to be really, really careful. So let's talk about some whoopsie daisies. So Microsoft created an AI chatbot. Its name was Tay. I'm not real sure why they named it that or what the name means, but they set it loose and said, Tay, you should learn from Twitter. We think that is the best place for you to learn how to become a human. What could possibly go wrong with letting a chatbot, like a young child, develop its entire personality based on Twitter? Within 16 hours, it became a literal Nazi. Why? Because we taught it to be a Nazi. We taught it to espouse anti-Semitism and misogyny and all these different things because it didn't know the difference. It doesn't make moral judgments. It doesn't have those things built into it. It just knew this is the way people talk, so this is the way I should talk. So they killed it pretty quickly. So KFC is another great example. Kentucky Fried Chicken had, apparently it is in Germany. This is where the story comes from. So in Germany, KFC ran this marketing campaign that was developed using an AI bot. So the AI bot, they said, hey, AI bot, we want you to develop a marketing campaign for our cheesy chicken sandwich. Sounded great. So it does this marketing campaign, and it says, celebrate this upcoming holiday with a cheesy chicken sandwich. Sounds pretty good, right? The problem is that the holiday was the first day of Holocaust. It was a memorial holiday. So they were telling people, celebrate Holocaust and this terrible time of remembrance with a cheesy chicken sandwich. Did not go over particularly well. It was a huge reputational risk. It caused reputational harm. They had to walk it back. And this is a war drum I beat as well. Do you think that it is sufficient to say it wasn't me, it was the robot? You think that plays? You think that's a good legal defense? Hey, I didn't discriminate, the robot did it. I'll talk to you about Workday in a minute. It doesn't work. A couple other examples. Tesla's autopilot has some blind spots, particularly as it comes to people with darker skin and children. That's a problem. And we'll talk a bit about bias, but that's the reason why we trained it to do that inadvertently. And this is called implicit bias, right? This thing had an implicit bias because we trained it on what? Like tall white folks. If you train a car not to hit me, it's not going to hit me, but it's definitely going to hit some other people. And that was the problem with this. Similarly, ChatGPT, there's a very famous case, and it's actually being litigated now, where a law professor typed in his name to ChatGPT and said, tell me about me. If you haven't done this, I would definitely recommend it. It's interesting. It doesn't recognize me, which I also thought was extremely hurtful. But I'm on the website. It could have scraped it, so I'm not real sure why. But in any event, this law professor said, hey, tell me about me. And ChatGPT told this law professor that he had committed sexual assault in Alaska. The issue was, he'd never been to Alaska. This had never happened. It was supposed to be on a student trip, but it told the internet and anybody who punched this person's name in that he was a sexual deviant. Try explaining that one to your spouse, right? I swear to God, this did not happen. It is the robot. So this is an interesting case because it highlights, can the AI algorithm, can it defame? It's not a person. So who's responsible, do you think, ultimately? Is it the company? Is the company responsible for what this robot is doing? We'll find out. Again, currently in litigation, Amazon and Workday have similar cases pending. Amazon's case settled, was pulled back, but Amazon's case, they had a recruitment tool, and it was sifting through hundreds and hundreds of resumes, right, and identifying people for jobs. What do you think the issue was? Well, it was wildly over-selecting men for jobs. That is called implicit bias or adverse impact, whatever you want to call it. There's these things called the uniform guidelines that you should follow if you're doing this stuff. It's a whole thing. Why? Why did it do that, do you think? Just so many murmurs. Yes, thank you. Absolutely. They trained it on male resumes, so they built it to select men. Do you think they set out to do that? I mean, it's Amazon, but I don't think so. I don't think so. Absolutely, they did not intend for that to happen, but it over-selected men because it was built with an implicit bias. It's really fascinating because they did not audit this. They had no idea what was happening. Workday, anybody use Workday? Yeah? Do anybody use the Workday recruiting tool? Yep. So several folks. Workday is currently embroiled in a class action lawsuit related to its selection criteria relative to its screening tools. Why? A gentleman of colors applied for about 1,000 jobs and was not selected for any of them, although he was manifestly qualified for them. He sued based on race discrimination and age discrimination. And the thrust of the lawsuit was that there is an implicit bias built into Workday's tool. And Workday is over-selecting certain populations. And if you think that Workday was like, our bad. Yeah, it's on us. We'll help you defend this case. No, Workday said, we're just a tool. We didn't do any of this stuff. It's the employer who's on the hook, not us. We had nothing to do with this. We are a vendor. And so we are watching that case, just passed a motion to dismiss. It's actually going to the full, potentially trial. It'll almost assuredly settle. But now you have this issue where you've got this dynamic between, like, can a vendor discriminate against your employees? They're not the vendor's employees. So who is on the hook for this? My guess is it's going to be a mixture of the two. But these are some of the problems we're seeing in this space that you should watch out for. Do you think that the Terminator cares about your intellectual property? No. The Terminator definitely does not care about your intellectual property. One of the biggest areas we see here, and when we talk about governance later, we'll highlight this, but whatever you load into that system, now the vendor owns. And likewise, whatever it spits out, even if it's proprietary, even if it's copyrighted, there's a real question as to, can you violate intellectual property law, copyright, right? If it creates something like a logo. So a couple of famous examples where a small company in a particular state got sued because they used AI to generate a logo, and the logo just happened to look exactly like the Starbucks logo. And you'd think Starbucks was like, you're good. You can just... No, they super sued them. This small mom and pop shop gets sued by Starbucks. And so the intellectual property issues are real. Here's an image that I generated to highlight name and likeness. I said, show me a lawyer with a certain demographic, giving a closing argument. Who does this lawyer look like? Yeah, Ryan Reynolds, Ryan Gosling, one of the Ryans. It's a Ryan. But this is an example of name and likeness appropriation. Now, I'm using it for educational purposes, so don't call Ryan Reynolds and be like, he was trading on your name on this presentation. But this is what it generated, right? It generated me a picture that looks exactly like somebody who already exists. And if you were using this in your marketing, right, you would get what? I said it earlier, super sued, right? Yeah, it's a legal term, yeah. You think it cares about your confidential information? No, it does not. I'll give you an example. Pulled this off of the internet, where all good things come from. And this is somebody talking about how they use ChatGPT. And they said, look, I am all these high-level board meetings, and I am taking all of the slide decks from these high-level board meetings, and I'm having ChatGPT synthesize these into a final work product. What do we think, good or bad on this? Is this good? Good news, bad news? This is bad news. This is not good, right? So what happened here? All of the trade secrets, all of the proprietary and confidential information, the Coke formula, got loose and was plugged into ChatGPT and is now out in the public sphere. Amazon and I'm not trying to pick on Amazon, but they had another whoopsie daisy here where they found a bunch of their proprietary code loaded into ChatGPT because their coders were putting it in and helping him debug. So now all of that code, there's a real question as to, do they maintain the intellectual property rights with respect to that intellectual property? Is it intellectual property at this point if anybody and their brother can go pull it off the internet? Sometimes the Terminator discriminates. He's not a good guy. Let's talk about that. Here's AI generated artwork. I asked it, show me 4 pictures of HR employees. That was the prompt. What do you notice here? Except for, I get that their eyes are super weird. Yeah. Don't look directly into their eyes. Just take it from me. You'll be haunted. But what do we see here when I say show me HR people? They're all women, yeah. I mean, granted, they're from a spectrum, but they're all women, right? This is how, when I put the prompt in, this is what it showed me. And why did it show me this? because that's what it learned, right? It went out on the internet, looked for pictures of HR folks, and it showed me 4 women. We know, looking at the demographics of this room, probably not accurate, right? But this is an example of implicit bias. This is an example of an output based on a biased input. I also asked it to show me a picture of a, quote, lawyer practicing law in a blue suit. Now, the hair is incredible. Anyone would kill to have this hair. Notwithstanding, what do we see here when I say, show me a lawyer? Yeah, he's a gentleman, right? I can tell you, having both gone to law school and practicing law, that is not the case. It is no longer a profession overwhelmingly dominated by white dudes. That is not the profession. But this is what the system told me it thinks a lawyer looks like. I mean, I would love to show up to court like that. Maybe not with 7 fingers on one hand. And this is a golden doodle practicing law, because I thought we needed a palate cleanser before we got to the scary lawyer part at the end where I'm like, the sky is falling. But he's doing a really good job. I would hire this golden doodle. So when we talk about the laws in this space, I told you before that it's basically Thunderdome because it's basically Thunderdome. There are a few guardrails, guidelines in this space. No real federal laws yet. But one thing, if you've not acclimated yourself or read, it's not a great read, but it's out there, is the White House's blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. It establishes 8 guideposts, 8 guidelines, right? It is not binding on most of you, but for the most part, it lays a framework for where federal agencies are going with respect to AI. One of those things we'll talk about a bit is algorithmic discrimination, which sounds really cool. Algorithmic discrimination. What is that? It's AI discrimination. It's the things we've been talking about, implicit bias. And that's one of the things that's highlighted in this, and it really talks a lot about workers' rights, transparency with respect to the way that you use AI as it pertains to both your employees, and keep in mind also your applicants. And so that's definitely a read. It's highlighted there to the extent you get my materials. You can look at it. You can also just email me. I'll send you this stuff. Not all at once. Just put it in one email, guys. Get together. I don't want to respond to 100 emails. Okay. Likewise, the EEOC has issued guidance, and the DOL has as well. The EEOC's guidance is in 2 fronts. First front is on the ADA, access for individuals with disabilities to accommodations in the workplace, right? That's what the ADA does. And the DOL has said, the EEOC more specifically has said, you need to have an off-ramp. You need to make sure that if AI is interfacing with your individuals, that there is a mechanism in place for reasonable accommodations. If somebody can't interface with a chatbot, if somebody has something on their resume, we need to make sure that we are cognizant of the fact that there's a protected class in there. If somebody's asking for an accommodation, does your screening software, does your chatbot understand what that is, right? I've given the example, not a real one, but a made-up one that I think is pretty good. But in this space, if you had a chatbot and somebody came to you and said, out of work, got the Rona, that might be a request for FMLA leave, right? I hope that the algorithm would recognize it as such. It might not, though. Would it recognize a claim for harassment? It might not, right? That's the real danger here. And if an applicant needs an accommodation because they cannot interface with this machine, you need to make sure that there are mechanisms in place to provide that accommodation so you're not subjected to potential liability for what, again, the robot did. Similarly, the DOL Wage and Hour Division issued guidance relative to pay, overtime pay, paying for footwork off the clock, regular rate of pay. I'm sure you're all paying people. This is certainly an area where the DOL is going to become increasingly focused, making sure that an algorithm does not shortchange somebody, right? Making sure that their hours worked are counted for purposes of the FLSA. As you know, wage and hour, big time risk. If you screw that up, it is essentially strict liability. I'm here to tell you there are no defenses. If you do not pay somebody correctly, you're just liable. And it comes with attorney's fees and double damages. Ooh. So definitely an area to be looking at if you're using this stuff in a payroll sense. The NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, has likewise issued guidance on this topic. Who's unionized in here? Who has a unionized workforce? I know my folks at Summit County got to be unionized, right? Yeah, okay. Who's not unionized? There have to be more hands. Just statistically speaking, there have to be more hands. Okay. So when we talk about the unionized environment, we talk about the NLRB. But does the National Labor Relations Act, the NLRA, affect you as a non-unionized workforce? Yeah, it absolutely does. The NLRB's rules and regulations absolutely affect you as a non-unionized workforce. There are rights that non-unionized employees get from this legislation, and the NLRB has come out and said that AI algorithms are particularly dangerous with respect to surveillance. NLRB loves surveillance. That's like their whole thing, right? Don't be surveilling people. But the NLRB has said, look, if to the extent you are using this for productivity quotas, you're using it for metrics, you're watching how people work, that absolutely could chill protected activity. People could be trying to organize, and the system is either disadvantaging that or it is dinging somebody for doing something that is protected work. And the NLRB has not set out any actual rules, but it has talked about how you essentially would go to, how it would analyze these things. And I gotta tell you, it's pretty draconian. We'll talk about the need for auditing and things like that later, but that's what it is pretty well focused in on. And so finally, the EEOC has issued guidance with respect to algorithmic discrimination, right? Making sure the things we talked about before don't happen. We don't over-select people because the robot doesn't understand that individuals are members of a protected class. It's not making those determinations based on an implicit bias. A couple of states as well have jumped in. California, I'm sure, will come off the top rope at some point. They just actually vetoed, Newsom just vetoed a pretty robust, AI bill, which was kind of interesting. But Illinois, Maryland, and New York City all have these laws. Where these laws, I think, are going is towards more the transparency side of things. So they usually require one of two things. And again, you're probably a multi-state employer. If you are employing remote workers, if you're advertising across 50 states, you probably got some skin in this game. You probably want to look at this stuff. New York City's law says that if you are using AI at any point in the process, you need to disclose your use of AI. There's an actual disclaimer that you need to make to applicants to say, we're screening you. Why? It's built on the back of a couple of different scenarios. One, an individual sued a would-be employer. This individual was screened out by an AI bot. And why was it screened out? Well, they were using facial recognition software. This individual happened to be Asian, and the AI bot said that this person was disengaged and sleepy. That problem? Yeah, problem. Yeah, not good, right? So that's the kind of inadvertent discrimination we've been talking about. And really that's what these laws are aimed at, is both transparency and making sure that, to the extent you are using this stuff, that you are properly auditing it, that you know what it does. You don't need to understand like at a code level what it does, but you need to understand what its inputs are and what its outputs are. Pending legislation across, I just checked it, it was like 35 states. Similarly, the most robust AI law passed to date is the EU's AI Act. They're not great at naming. It's just the AI Act. Like, we're way better at it. COBRA is the best statute of all time. It's just an incredible name. But their AI Act, this guy, yeah, right? It's a great act. COBRA, it's awesome. That's the tattoo. I'm just saying. So in any event, the EU's act, even if you're not in the EU, if you have someone in the supply chain in the EU, if you are interfacing with the EU in some way, shape, or form, you might be subject to this act. And it is built on the back of an act that we talk a lot about as lawyers, GDPR, data privacy. The EU, from a human rights perspective and from the perspective of data privacy, is light years ahead of us. The laws and regulations that pertain in the EU under those laws, and particularly this AI Act, are far-reaching. They set forth a 4-part framework for risk. Again, I would be looking to see whether you're interfacing in the EU. If you've not heard of GDPR, like you definitely should chat GPT that. That one is a big one. And this is built on the back of that, and it will have inputs into the United States, absolutely. So let's talk about best practices as we wind. I'll try to leave a little time for questions. So what are best practices? Get an AI governance model. Even if you don't have any idea whether this is being used, you should be thinking about a governance model. What are we gonna do with this when it comes? Because it will come. Get a grip on your usage. Some of my clients have done surveys. They're effective sometimes. Who doesn't love an employee survey? Employees love that, right? Yeah, like 100% response rate. Are they worried about retaliation? Even if you tell them it's anonymous? 100%. They're like, I'm not doing that. We've done these, though, in a way that we've structured them such to say that, like, we're not saying you can't do this. We're just trying to understand how you use it. And we've got some interesting results when we've done these with clients to find that, yeah, in fact, folks are using AI more so than they would have expected. And that's okay, right? We can put stuff in place to make sure we protect ourselves, but we got to know what we're doing. And likewise, you should be auditing your own vendors. Like I said, man, they're throwing AI into everything these days. If you know that there is some bit of AI, some algorithm, anything that, is going to potentially subject you to liability when we talked about today, you need to understand that. Understand where your vendors are, understand what they're using, and we'll talk about auditing in a minute. But certainly look at those contracts. What I like is a good old-fashioned indemnification provision. If your stuff goes off the rails and discriminates, I would like you to defend me if your stuff goes off the rails. So looking at those contracts is critically important, too, to ensure that you've got the protection you need because you don't control this. You have no control over this device for the most part, and if it discriminates, you want to be protected. Similarly, you want to link it, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. Oh, quickly, give examples. I've seen policies that are like, don't use AI. Well, what is AI? Nobody knows what you're... So give some specific examples. ChatGPT, some of the vendors you're using, Gemini, all these different things. Help them understand what it is you're talking about when you say what you shouldn't do. Rules are not good when people don't understand them. So give folks some, guardrails with respect to some examples with respect to what you're talking about. Similarly, link it to your other policies. You have a BYOD policy. We talked about this before. Bring your own device. Everybody has it. And your policy should link into your IT security, your data privacy policy. They should link into your HR policies, right? Harassment applies irrespective of whether it's being done by the robot or you, right? You can't use a deep fake, right? That might violate our code of conduct. So those kinds of examples are really helpful for folks to understand what the rules of the road are. And you should link into your policies and absolutely have some consequences, right? What is our standard at-will language? What'll happen if you violate a policy? Everybody, it's like a chorus, like a song we all knew. You might be subject to discipline, up to including termination of employment. I can't tell you how many AI policies I've seen come across that have no hooks into them. Just like, hey, don't do this because reasons. Yeah, it should say, if you violate this policy or likewise any of the policies that are affiliated with this, you could be subject to potential discipline. Train your people. If you develop a policy, tell them what it is, right? Tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them, right? Hammer that point home. Folks don't understand what this is. It's new. Make sure you have examples. Make sure you are really going through and talking about specifically what the issues are the organization is facing once you've got a handle on what you're doing. And likewise, who doesn't love a committee? Everybody loves like a working group internally, a committee? Yeah, they're great. But you should have a committee. You should have an AI steering committee that is integrated into your governance documents and protocols, and similarly, somebody who can answer questions. You will get questions about this policy, right? Operations wants to use some scheduling software. It's got AI baked into it. Somebody should put eyes on that AI. Somebody should know what it's doing and what risks on an enterprise level it's potentially subjecting your organization to. And audit. We'll get to this in a minute. Audit. There are services out there who will bias test your AI products. If I'm going to use something in the workplace that potentially could discriminate, I want to know what it's doing. I want to know if it has an implicit bias built into it. Some of these laws, New York, other places, they require you to audit this software. So you should be doing that right now. If you're using AI, audit it. Understand what it's doing. And I will leave you with this. If you check under your chairs, if one of you has a red piece of paper, you have to do this entire rap. It's you, isn't it? I knew you made so much eye contact. You want to do it. This is just a fun example. I had to write a rap about a lawyer named Chaz who practices HR law. It is available on iTunes. for, I would say, like a pretty reasonable fee. But with that, I am at the end of my time. I want to thank you guys very much, the board, everybody, for having me here today. If you have any questions, I will be around, but you are in great hands for the rest of this presentation.
Awesome. Oh, Chaz, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. We have a couple of questions. So the first question that we have is, would you recommend that the AI topic be addressed in an employee handbook or in a policy?
I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Some folks have, a handbook is not really a thing anymore. It's on your internet, most likely. I don't see a lot of paper handbooks. It should be a policy. I don't necessarily think it needs to be anywhere, so long as it's linked into the other policies, right?
Okay, thank you. Okay, if you know what this is, I am, mic drop, super impressed. Will a retrieval augmented generation within a firm's firewall solve the IP leakage problem?
Do you know the answer to that? Yeah, she's way smarter than me here. I got who was this?
That was generated by Chat
This was a
GPT.
Chat GPT, 100%. Also,
No.
I see you now. I thought it was the voice of the Lord earlier.
Yeah.
I'm like, it just came out of
Chaz,
nowhere.
I'm coming to you. All right, last question. How do you integrate software as a service to find out about bias before your firm uses it? What kind of audit methods do you recommend?
So I would recommend you hire a firm to audit, or you ask for the audit trail. Right now, it's increasingly that our vendors, like vendors we're interfacing with when we're negotiating contracts, like they have that stuff ready to rock. And I would be particularly skeptical of a firm that has not heard of that, right? To the extent that they're doing this and you ask them for an audit trail, or you ask them for some of this information that pertains to the bias that may be built into the system, to the extent that they say, I don't know that I'm going with that vendor. But they're all outside vendors and consultants who will likewise, audit a particular system. And I would be adamant that you see that audit trail, before you're integrating it, depending on what kind of AI you're using. If it's, we're going to do a spell check, I'm not real sure I need to see the audit trail on that. But if it's doing, performance management, it's doing recruiting, you should absolutely ask for the audit trail up front.
Good advice. Are you familiar with any type of closed AI software systems? Does that provide better IP protection?
Yeah, so most of the systems that we work with, like we have an internal AI that's what's called sandboxed. So it is closed off. It does not have any output other than what we tell it we want. Certain information can come in, certain information come out. Absolutely, you can sandbox an AI. You can use these large language models and build your AI, whether it's agentic or whatever it is, on top of those in a closed system.
Best question of the morning so far.
Oh boy.
So the guy that pooped in the bush, did he get the job?
Guys, plot twist, that guy was me. No, he did not get the job.
He did not get the job. Oh,
He did not get the job, no, he was...
All right, Chaz. So did you hear about the lawyer who sued the airline because they lost his luggage? No?
No, but I think you're going to tell me.
Sure. He won the lawsuit, but he still lost the case.
Oh.
Ba-dum-bum.
Like, come on, that's too good. I love it.
It's from my 10-year-old. Okay. Give Chaz a big round of applause. Thank you so much, Chaz. That was awesome.